Usually when we picture a full day of education, we sort of imagine this massive, heavy industrial machine,
Oh, absolutely.
Like you picture the kids walking in at the morning bell, the gears grinding for 7 straight hours, the conveyor belt of different classes, and finally they're released at 3 p.m., supposedly just filled to the brim with knowledge.
Right. That's the deeply ingrained assumption we all have. But when you look at the actual math of how the human brain works, I mean, that massive 7-hour factory is running on almost zero voltage.
Yeah, 0 voltage, which is wild to think about.
It really is. A traditional school building is fundamentally a logistics and management system first, and then an educational system second. The logistics of crowd control have somehow convinced us that scale, like the sheer volume of time spent in a chair, is exactly what learning actually requires.
Which brings us to the core premise of today's deep dive, a premise that absolutely shatters that assumption for anyone listening. Because when you transition away from that traditional school system and look at the actual mechanics of neurobiological learning, we find that 90 minutes of focused learning actually beats a 7-hour school day.
It sounds impossible at first, right? But to understand why that seemingly crazy math actually checks out, we have to mathematically deconstruct where those 7 hours in a traditional school building actually go.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we are talking about 420 minutes total.
Exactly, 420 minutes.
It honestly reminds me of a supposedly critical, mandatory 8-hour corporate training day. You know, the exact kind I'm talking about.
Oh, we all do.
You drag yourself to the conference room, and you get to the end of the day only to realize maybe 15 minutes was actual valuable work.
Yeah, and the rest is just waiting.
Right. The rest of the time was just waiting for the presenter to connect to the Wi-Fi, doing awkward icebreakers, shuffling down the hall to the cafeteria, and, listening to someone repeat the same instruction 5 times because half the room wasn't paying attention.
That corporate training is the exact daily reality for a child. I mean, let's break down the factual timeline from our sources on this 420-minute day. First, you have transportation.
Right, the bus or the car line.
Yeah, that's 15 to 30 minutes just getting to the building. Then arrival, morning announcements, putting coats away, unpacking bags. That takes another 20 minutes.
Easily.
And throughout the day, kids are transitioning between classrooms or subjects. That means settling in, getting materials out, waiting for the teacher to start. So conservatively, that eats up 40 minutes of the day.
And obviously, kids are human beings.
Right.
They need to eat, they need to move around. So you factor in lunch and recess, which is, 65 minutes?
Roughly, yeah.
But then you have all the hidden logistics. Just the waiting.
The crowd control.
Exactly. Lining up to go to the bathroom, lining up to walk to the cafeteria, settling the class down after those transitions. That is another 40 minutes right there. We're already losing hours of the day, and nobody has even opened a textbook yet.
We haven't even touched behavior management.
Oh, wow, yeah.
When researchers conduct global surveys of teachers, and we're talking about gathering data from over 250,000 educators, the numbers show that 13 to 16% of class time goes strictly to keeping order.
Just keeping the room quiet.
Right. Redirecting behavior, getting kids to stop talking, managing disputes. That's at least 35 minutes a day. Then you have the re-explanation phase.
What does that look like?
Well, say a student grasps a new math concept in the first 2 minutes. The teacher still has to re-explain it for the 8 other kids who didn't get it.
Which makes sense. They have to.
They have to, but that's another 35 minutes where the child who already understands is essentially just sitting and waiting.
Just totally parked.
Oh.
Which leaves the actual group lecture.
Yeah.
If you calculate the time an adult is actively teaching, it comes out to about 105 minutes.
Right.
But this is one adult broadcasting a concept to 30 kids at once. It's not tailored to anyone's specific brain. If you process information quickly, you're bored. If you're a bit lost, you fall behind because the train just has to keep moving.
And so when you subtract all of that logistical bloat, all that waiting, all that crowd control, you get a staggering number. The result is that a child gets roughly 15 minutes of actual one-on-one individualized attention in a 7-hour day.
15 minutes out of 7 hours. I mean, there's a story from the source material that perfectly captures how absurd this is once you step outside of the system.
Oh, the Jackson story.
Yes. So there's this 9-year-old boy named Jackson who had never been in the traditional public school system, and he had to visit a school building for a simple 15-minute speech therapy evaluation.
Okay.
He finishes, walks out into the hallway, looks around at this massive, sprawling building filled with kids, and just innocently asks his mom, What do they do with the rest of the time?
It's so brilliant. A child completely outside the system instantly spots the massive inefficiency. And, this mathematical reality, 15 minutes of signal buried in hours of noise, perfectly explains the most famous phenomenon in education research.
The tutoring effect, right?
Exactly, the tutoring effect by Blumenkraft. Decades ago, researchers discovered that a purely average student, when given one-on-one tutoring, suddenly outperforms 98% of kids in a standard classroom.
That is a crazy statistic, 98%.
It is, because when you have one-on-one attention, you get instant error correction and personalized pacing. 90 minutes of pure, uninterrupted signal fundamentally changes the math of learning.
But okay, let me push back a little bit on behalf of everyone listening. Because if a student only gets 15 minutes of actual one-on-one time, how does the school fill the rest of those academic blocks?
Right.
We have to talk about the myth of practice makes perfect and the reality of busy work. Because I think a lot of you listening were raised to believe that doing 100 math problems on a worksheet builds discipline. I mean, isn't repetition the mother of skill? Don't kids need to just grind through those massive packets to really internalize a concept?
That is such a common belief. But here is the neurobiological reframe on that. Repetition is only valuable if it is perfect practice. Doing 100 problems unsupervised is fundamentally dangerous to the learning process.
Wait, dangerous how so?
Think about the physical neural pathways forming in a child's brain. If a child sits down with a worksheet of 100 multiplication problems and they misunderstand the core concept on problem number 3, nobody is there to catch it. They just keep going.
Oh, I see. So they are practicing the wrong method 97 times in a row.
Exactly. They are actively myelinating the wrong neural pathway. By the end of that worksheet, they haven't achieved mastery at all. They've reinforced a bad habit so deeply that a teacher now has to spend weeks unteaching it.
So the child is actually more confident in the wrong answer than they were when they started?
Right. That isn't practice. That is damage. 10 perfect reps with immediate real-time feedback beat 100 unmonitored reps every single time.
Because at the kitchen table, if a kid gets problem 3 wrong, you see it happen in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
You correct the misunderstanding, they adjust, and you move on. So if 10 perfect problems are biologically superior, why do schools assign 100?
Well, this requires protecting the teachers in this conversation because it is absolutely not their fault.
Right, it's a systemic thing.
Totally. Busy work, which eats up about 50 minutes of the typical school day, by the way, is a non-negotiable tool for crowd control.
Back to crowd control.
Always. It exists solely to keep 30 kids quiet and physically seated so the teacher can grade papers, handle administrative tasks, or, help one struggling student without the room just erupting into chaos. It is management disguised as education.
Wow. And understanding that distinction changes how we even talk about learning at home. If you want to move away from the busy work model, you kind of have to strip away the anxiety that kids associate with the whole phrase schoolwork.
Language matters so much here.
It really does. Our sources mentioned this family who noticed that whenever they mentioned it was time for school, their daughter Kaylee would visibly tense up, like her shoulders would rise, her mood would drop.
Just a physical stress response.
Exactly. The word itself was a trigger for exhaustion and busy work. So they completely changed the vocabulary. They renamed their structured 90-minute learning time brain food.
Brain food, I love that.
Yeah. And by simply reframing the activity as fueling the brain rather than, completing a chore, the resistance vanished.
That intentional shift in framing pairs beautifully with another concept we found in the sources, the invisible classroom.
Okay, tell us about the invisible classroom.
It refers to the organic, all-day learning that happens entirely outside of formal instruction. It's where the world itself becomes the curriculum.
Right, and the perfect example of the invisible classroom from the text is taking a seemingly non-academic task and just revealing the math inside it.
Like the Airbnb remodel.
Yes. The kids were helping their parents remodel an Airbnb rental property. They're changing vanities, fixing plumbing, using power tools. And to change a vanity, you have to measure the space. You have to understand fractions to cut the pipes.
You're doing actual engineering.
Exactly. You are problem-solving and applying complex math to a physical, three-dimensional space.
And that leads to the ultimate acid test for any assignment you give a child. Or, frankly, any task you take on yourself. You have to ask, does this build curiosity or does it build resentment?
Ooh, that's a great question. Curiosity or resentment?
Because hard work isn't always fun in the moment, sure. But struggling with a real-world concept and then mastering it creates genuine dopamine. It creates a lifelong learner. Giving a child 100 pointless worksheet problems they already know how to do just to keep them quiet, that only builds resentment.
But here is where it gets really interesting for you listening. Even if we strip away the busy work, rebrand it all to brain food, and focus on pure, one-on-one, perfect practice, we still run into a biological limit, don't we?
We absolutely do. The hardware has limits.
Right, because you can't just take 7 hours of curriculum and condense it into a single 90-minute marathon session. How long can a child actually sustain that level of intense focus before the brain just refuses to process more data?
It's shorter than you think.
Because usually if a kid starts fidgeting after 10 minutes, parents and teachers treat it as a behavioral issue, like sit still, pay attention. We discipline them for losing focus.
And that is a huge mistake. We are pathologizing biology. Telling a young child to focus harder for 45 minutes is literally like telling them to grow taller on command.
Wow.
The physiological hardware simply isn't there yet. Researchers have actually put cameras in classrooms and tracked kids' eye movements and physical engagement.
What did they find?
They found that for elementary-age children, on-task behavior drops off a cliff after just 10 minutes of direct instruction.
10 minutes.
Just 10 minutes. Pediatricians and neuroscientists emphasize that breaks are a biological necessity. They are not a reward for good behavior. The brain physically requires a reset period to transfer new information from short-term working memory, which has a very tiny capacity, into long-term storage.
The breakdown of how long these focused learning blocks should be based on age, it just completely contradicts everything the public school system does.
It really does. Let me give you the actual biological windows. For ages 5 to 7, the biological window for intense, focused learning is just 10 to 12 minutes at a time.
10 to 12 minutes.
Yep. For 8 to 10-year-olds, it pushes to 12 to 15 minutes. Ages 11 to 13 can handle 15 to 20 minutes. And even at 14 and older, the brain maxes out at about 20-minute blocks of pure acquisition before it needs to buffer.
And you compare that biological reality to a public school system that expects a 6-year-old to sit perfectly still and absorb information through a 45-minute class period.
It operates in direct defiance of human neurobiology.
You can see how this actually plays out in real life by looking at siblings under the same roof using this short block system. It proves how wildly different biological attention spans can be, even with the exact same genetics.
Oh, the 3 kids from the case study.
Yeah, take Jackson, the 9-year-old we mentioned earlier. He can be highly energetic and fidgety, but if you give him a reading block, he finishes it perfectly right in his 15 to 20-minute sweet spot. If you forced him to sit for 30 minutes, it would just end in a total meltdown. Then you have his brother, Tyler. Kyler has a much slower processing pace. Before they started using a physical timer, he would drift off and daydream for 40 minutes while staring at a single math concept.
Which is so common.
But the moment they introduce a 15-minute timer, his brain locks in. The constraint creates focus, and he finishes his work in 10 to 15 minutes.
That constraint is everything.
And then the oldest, Kaylee, she just sets her timer, crushes her subjects in 5 to 10 minutes each, and finishes her entire day's worth of structured learning in about an hour.
And you know, the underlying mechanism binding all these different processing speeds together is this golden rule of neurobiology, but it feels completely counterintuitive to most adults.
What's the rule?
Stop before they want to stop. End on a high note.
Wait, really? Even if they are having fun and they are in the zone, you still cut it off?
Yes. You never want to drain the battery to zero. If a child finishes a math concept in 12 minutes and says they want to do more, you shut the book.
That is so hard to do as a parent, though.
It is. But think about the long game. You want them to associate the act of learning with spike in dopamine, with success and energy. If you let them push until they're exhausted and frustrated, that exhaustion becomes the lingering emotional memory tied to the subject.
Ah, so by stopping early, you leave them wanting more for tomorrow.
Exactly. You are building long-term stamina by protecting their short-term energy.
Okay, so if 10 to 20-minute biological blocks are the secret formula here, how do you actually weave this into an already chaotic adult day?
That's the real question, isn't it?
Right, because think about your own schedule, you listening right now. Whether you work varying shifts, have a brutal daily commute, or you're a single parent juggling a million responsibilities. You don't need a pristine, perfectly quiet 4-hour block of time to make this work. It's much closer to finding spare change in your couch cushions.
I love that analogy, spare change.
Yeah, you're just looking for 15-minute pockets of time that already exist in the margins of your day.
The guiding principle here is, your life dictates the windows, learning fills them. You do not rearrange your entire professional and personal life to mimic an industrial school schedule. You just need to find 3 to 5 small 15-minute windows scattered anywhere throughout a 24-hour period to hit that 90-minute goal.
Let's look at what a truly messy, real-world week looks like to prove this doesn't require rigidity. So on a Monday, a family might have a somewhat standard flow. They do a morning routine, maybe reading a passage from the Daily Stoic over breakfast to discuss a character concept, and then they knock out 3 short learning blocks before lunch.
Pretty standard.
Right. But Tuesday is completely derailed because one of the kids has a speech therapy appointment across town at 10 a.m. So the learning blocks just happen in the car or late in the afternoon.
Adaptability.
Exactly. Wednesday gets interrupted by a morning vision therapy appointment, followed by a massive 2-hour grocery run to Costco. Thursday is a community co-op day where they socialize with other kids, meaning there are literally 0 structured learning blocks at home. And Friday is just playing complex board games, which organically covers math, reading rules, and strategic engineering.
And see, that variability isn't a failure to keep a schedule. It is the ultimate advantage. It completely dismantles the artificial idea that learning only counts if it happens between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m.
Right.
And this directly challenges another major mental barrier we see in the sources, the myth of the perfect time to start taking control of education.
Oh, the real estate family story.
Yes. There is a documented case of a family that spent months meticulously planning to start their homeschooling journey in August. But they were real estate investors, and their life just exploded into chaos.
Chaos is an understatement.
Really. They were simultaneously managing massive gut renovation rehabs on a 10-unit apartment complex and completely flipping a 5-bedroom house.
The sheer volume of decision fatigue and physical exhaustion involved in managing contractors for a 10-unit building plus a separate house flip while trying to raise kids. I mean, the stress must have been off the charts.
They were buried in drywall dust and contractor delays. They were completely overwhelmed and couldn't even attempt to start their 15-minute learning blocks until October.
So they were 2 months late.
2 months late. And the revelation from that chaotic delay, it still worked perfectly.
Wow.
Missing 2 months of traditional school time didn't ruin their child's education because when they did start, the 90 minutes of pure signal easily outpaced what the child would have learned in a classroom anyway.
So the takeaway is absolute.
It is. There is no perfect time. Waiting for your life to calm down is a trap. There is just starting, however messily, today.
And there is a very simple diagnostic exercise you can do right now to prove you already have the time for this.
The time-proof exercise.
Yeah. Sit down and write out your actual honest, messy daily schedule. Wake time, making breakfast, the commute, work hours, making dinner, doing the laundry, getting the kids to bed. Just map it all out.
Getting it on paper is key.
Once it's on paper, take a pen and simply circle any 15-minute gaps you find. Maybe it's 15 minutes right after breakfast before you leave for work. Maybe it's 15 minutes while the pasta water is boiling for dinner.
Or 15 minutes right before bed.
Exactly. Finding just 2 to 6 of those little hidden gaps is enough to fit in the entire day's requirement of one-on-one brain food.
When you synthesize the mechanics of everything we've explored today, a pretty profound realization emerges.
What's that?
The biggest barrier to transforming how a child learns isn't a lack of time. It certainly isn't a lack of money. I mean, you do not need a $1,200 boxed curriculum or a dedicated classroom in your house to do this.
Definitely not.
The real barrier is purely psychological. It is our deep, unexamined attachment to an industrial 7-hour system that was designed to prioritize crowd management over neurobiology.
And if you are sitting there right now feeling overwhelmed by the idea of managing a child's education, it is absolutely okay to let go of the guilt of not replicating a traditional classroom at your kitchen table.
Let it go entirely.
You don't need a bell, you don't need 45-minute lectures, and you definitely don't need busy worksheets. You just need a few 15-minute pockets of focus and the willingness to let the biology do the rest.
Which leaves a final, lingering question for you to ponder.
Oh, this is the big one.
If we now know that a 7-hour school day for a child is secretly just 90 minutes of actual productivity buried under logistics, waiting, and busy work,
Yeah.
what does that say about the traditional 8-hour, 9-to-5 workday we force adults to endure? How much of your own workday is actually deep, focused productivity, and how much of it is just adult busy work?